And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, your Indiana Hoosiers celebrate Valentine's Day by defeating the Illinois Fighting Illini 78-68 in a game that was marred by so many foul calls and so many free throws and some really ugly and sloppy play at times. But ultimately, it goes in the record books for the Hoosiers as a W. It gets the Hoosiers back over 500 in Big Ten play at 8-7, 15-12 overall. And, you know, I think in some ways represented some growth for this team because Indiana did not come out with their A effort and with their A game, especially early in both halves, but they were able to weather some kind of lackluster play and still, find a way to make enough plays, grind out enough plays to get a 10-point win over a team that they should beat and that they did beat. And we will break it all down for you here on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with my Valentines for the evening, Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. That's how dedicated we are to this. We're here for you late, very late on a Wednesday night, on a Valentine's Day night, to talk about this IU-Illinois game. And let's start tonight's show as we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And, I mean, who else gets the banner moment but Juwan Morgan? He was absolutely magnificent tonight, even though it wasn't one of his better games offensively. How he played defensively was just terrific. And there was one play in particular that was bigger than all the rest. You know, if you go back and think about the way that this game started in the second half, Indiana had a 10-point lead and had really, controlled action in the first half after that lackluster start. They had used a 14-0 run to gain control, went into halftime with the 10-point lead, but came out in the second half, and Illinois just kind of systematically chipped away. And all of a sudden, it's 51-49. Illinois has a sizable amount of momentum, and things feel like they're starting to teeter a little bit. And LaRon Black seals Juwan Morgan, gets a pass. It looks like he's going to go up for an easy two. And Juwan Morgan recovers and makes just one of his many incredible blocks on the evening. It kept the score at 51-49, prevented Illinois from tying it, and they would never get any closer. I believe on the next possession down, Morgan got fouled and made one free throw. That made it 52-49. And then a couple of possessions later, Juwan drove into the lane, dished it out to Al Durham, who knocked down a three-pointer. That made it 55-49. And that allowed Indiana to open up some space, and they would kind of keep it there and nurse that lead, make enough free throws for the rest of the game to keep it out there. But that block by Juwan Morgan, one of his, how many blocks did he have tonight? 5 blocks. He had 4 steals. We're going to have to check the stats because I really wonder if an IU player has ever had 4 steals and 5 blocks in the same game. Certainly if they have, it hasn't happened often, and it probably hasn't been combined with 14 points, 3 assists, and 10 rebounds. It was really a terrific game from Juwan Morgan, and when his team really needed a play to help keep that lead, Juwan was there to come up with the big defensive play. Our banner moment, as always, brought to you by our friends at Hoosier Proud, an Indiana-based t-shirt and apparel company that is by Hoosiers and for Hoosiers. If you want to know why, you should go to HoosierProud.com and check them out. I will give you a few really good reasons. Number one, their designs. They're awesome. You can go there and get our Assembly Call t-shirts. You can go and get officially licensed Indiana gear, including the A.J. Moye t-shirts that we told you about earlier this season and have continued to remind you about. And then, of course, you've got their flagship products. They're just really interesting designs inspired by unique elements of the Hoosier State, something there for everybody. So check out their designs at HoosierProud.com. And when you do, the second reason to go there is you're supporting Indiana-based charities. That's something that Connor and the team at Hoosier Proud are committed to doing. And if you go to their website, you will find the Indiana-based charities that they support and that your t-shirt purchases will go to support. And the number 3 reason is that you save money. When you use the promo code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY, you save 15% on your entire order, not just your Assembly Call t-shirts, but everything that is in your shopping cart, 15% off. Again, the promo code is ASSEMBLY, and the website is HoosierProud.com. All right, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. And we start with Andy and his bottoms line, brought to us by IUtickets.shop.
Well, I think tonight we'll dub the game of unexpected contributions because, the bench in total had almost half of IU's points, 38 of the 78. Al Durham, Josh Newkirk, and Justin Smith all scored in double figures. In total, had those 38 points, went 14 of 19 from the field. and really just provided a huge lift after the slow start that you mentioned. Justin Smith and Al Durham really had some big minutes in the first half and really kind of pulled IU out of the doldrums that they seemed to start the game in. And then Josh Newkirk, who really had struggled of late, started the game pretty poorly, still made some mistakes, but he made some just big shots with the shot clock running out. Some drives to the basket, and exciting to see him, be able to contribute for a guy whose confidence was really wavering. You could tell, and so just huge contributions from those guys to really overcome, some ugly turnover numbers. 18 in total, 14 I think by the guards overall. So not a lot of good things to talk about in that regard, but a huge lift from the bench, and certainly one of the more balanced performances we've seen from IU this season, and probably in a lot recently. I think 6 guys had at least 9 points when you throw Freddie McSwain in the mix for that. So balanced effort, found a way to win a game that they should have won at home. And so I think it is kind of a sign of growth. There's certainly stuff to nitpick that we can talk about from the game, but good for them to come out and get a win, 3rd straight win, able to get a home win, and actually shot 75% from the free throw line in the second half. So if there's anything good that came out of the seemingly endless parade to the free throw line in the second half, at least it was that IU knocked them down from there at a rate far better than what we've seen from them most of the season.
Yes. All right. Now we go for Ryan's rant, brought to us by thebiglead.com.
Yeah, I thought that both teams kind of came out. I mean, Illinois got some results early with their offensive rebounding and a little bit of energy, but I thought both teams seemed pretty flat throughout the first half. Indiana probably could have been up 20 in the first half, but offensively there was just it was either they were kind of flat and just off, or maybe there was a little bit of rust because they've been playing so much in such a short period of time, and then to get 4 days off. I don't know what it was, but they were just a little, a half second late with everything tonight. I thought in the second half that, you saw stretches of them playing better on both ends of the floor. But I thought the defense was pretty darn good throughout. If you don't send the opposing team to the free throw line 30 times, this probably doesn't end up being 68 points allowed. I think that's a pretty safe assumption there. But the one thing I do want to mention is, again, with the Big Ten officiating, 47 fouls called tonight, 59 free throws. Nobody wants to see that. Like, what you're doing to the product by doing that is so lame. And Indiana was,
but Illinois also fouls on like every possession.
They do, but also you have to realize what I'm recognizing is the fouls wound up about even, but Indiana was the beneficiary of some ticky-tack calls in that first half, and Indiana was in the bonus with 13 minutes left, and I'm still complaining about it because it slowed the game down. There was no flow. It was almost the last 5 minutes. It got kind of close, but it was just a slog to even get through those last 5 minutes. So I don't know. I do agree. Illinois is a very aggressive defensive team that uses their hands a lot, which is, it leads to a lot of foul calls. But I just felt like it was they were almost artificially making up for it on, they make one bad call, and then instead of being like, okay, let's not make any more bad calls, they try and even it up with a bad call to the other team. Then they make another bad call, and you have to even it up. I mean, it was ridiculous. And that game was so slow. And look, Indiana won. It's a good win for them. It was one they needed to have. It's a Wednesday game, kind of an odd, late start and all that stuff. And they pulled it together. They won. And one thing that was impressive to me was how big they out-rebounded Illinois after a very bad start on the glass, to out-rebound 34-23 after starting out giving up 4 offensive rebounds on the first 3 possessions. That was pretty great. And so, credit to Indiana for battling through what was a tough game to stay focused to because of how much of a slog it was.
I think there are probably some fans who are disappointed that your rant was not about how empty the student section was tonight.
I wasn't there, so I can't really comment on it, quite frankly.
Well, our own Michael Dugan was there. He had really good tickets for the game, and he said it was pretty pathetic, and that's what most of the reports were.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was reading too. I didn't get a whole lot of crowd shots. We didn't get a whole lot of crowd shots, probably for good reason. But it's ridiculous. If you have student tickets and you're not going, you should have your student tickets taken away. I'm sorry. That's the way I feel right now, and that's the way I've always felt. Kind of. If you buy them, you should go. If you're not going to go, give them up. And give someone else a chance to get in there.
And if you're a current IU student and you have a Valentine more important than Juwan Morgan, I don't see how that's
Look,
possible.
you're in college. Stay up late. Go out afterwards, or go to dinner before. Take your date to the game, and then you can go out after. Come on now.
All right, you're listening to this.
None of you guys are dating anyway. You're doing the we're hanging out thing. That's not important enough to miss a basketball game.
You're listening to the Assembly Call IU post-game show. I'm Jared Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms breaking down Indiana's 10-point victory over Illinois. So, Andy, this was not a good game for Devonte Green, and it's been a big storyline how well he has played lately. He did not play well tonight. He, had 3 points, had 4 turnovers. He had a stretch in the second half of 3 straight possessions where it was turnover, bad shot. And I think he got yanked out of the game pretty soon after that. I think that was close to when he hurt his ankle. And, when he went out, when he got hurt and wasn't playing well, I started to get really nervous about this game because this is a particularly poor matchup for us, given that we have guards who aren't very good at dribbling, which, I know is kind of an odd thing to say, but it's true. I mean, Josh Newkirk, Robert Johnson, they aren't great ball handlers. They aren't great decision makers, on the move. And Al Durham at this point in his career is a guy who's really just trying not to make mistakes when he's handling the ball, not going to really create for anybody. To his credit, he really did a nice job of scoring points. But I got really nervous, that Indiana was going to struggle if Devonte Green either was ineffective enough to not play or hurt to not play. And he didn't play a lot there down the stretch. And it was kind of one of those where Robert and Josh kind of did just enough, to break the press and get the ball up to Juwan Morgan on certain possessions. But this, look, fortunately, Indiana doesn't have to play Illinois again. But doesn't this just kind of seem like a particularly bad matchup to you, given how much our guards tend to struggle with on-ball pressure, especially Josh and Robert?
Well, I think, and Ken Bykoff was pointing this out a few times, when guys got sped up, they made poor decisions. And that's what Illinois wants to do, is to get you sped up and do that. I mean, the reality is that if IU, once they were able to break the press and not aimlessly dribble around the midcourt line, they made 20 of 30 2-point shots. So, you're going to be able to score. It was just a matter of could they, take care of the ball. They're just telegraphing passes, making some kind of lazy, obvious passes. And then at other times, all the, the baseball analogies of not trying to hit a home run, things started. So I think it was Nick Baumgart on Twitter mentioned that, the first half IU had really taken control, looked like they were going to pull away. And then Devonte tries to throw the, 75-foot touchdown pass to, down at the end. And IU didn't lose the ball there, but they started to get pretty loose at that point. And over the last, in like a 4-minute span, IU turned the ball over 3 or 4 times toward the end of the first half, and that really carried over into the second. And so you saw some of those. He makes sees the pass to Al Durham where he's back cutting toward the basket, but it's like a laser to him that he just can't pull in. And again, that pass is there. There's opportunities for that, but you've just got to find a way to make simpler plays and take care of the ball. But then once you get across half court, don't just stand there and dribble around while, they can really, get into you and pressure you. And even at times late in the game, IU settled for threes when, they're really in foul trouble trying to figure that out. So it definitely is not a good matchup for a team that doesn't have a ton of, what you would deem reliable ball handlers that don't make you hold your breath every time they're going up against the press. So hopefully just kind of a blip for Devonte to, slip up. And I thought he was one of the guys. I remember having this conversation after the first Illinois game where it didn't necessarily seem like, people had things to nitpick with him, but overall he had played relatively well. So it was kind of a strange one for him overall, but hopefully just a blip, and hopefully his ankle's not bothering him too much.
Yeah,
he got held up on pretty good.
Did he stay on the floor? He didn't go to the locker room or anything, did he? Because it looked really scary to me when I saw it, live. The replay didn't look quite as bad, but
he got up and shot the free throw, and then I think he came and he missed it, and I think he came out shortly thereafter. And I don't think he came back in. Although to be fair, IU didn't sub at all between, I think it was about the 7:45 mark and until about a minute left. I mean, he really rolled with the guys that were out there, which was, I think it was Newkirk, Robert Johnson, Al. Freddie McSwain and Juwan Morgan, just the kind of lineup you'd expect to see this team close games with. So,
yeah, absolutely. All right, coming up here on the Assembly Call, I will point out tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed. We will go inside the numbers, and in the course of that, we're going to talk about Indiana's freshmen who really had some key contributions tonight. That is next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, celebrating Valentine's Day by breaking down Indiana's 10-point victory over the Illinois Fighting Illini. And it is time for tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed. I've got a ton of other Juwan Morgan moments written down, and I'll save those for later. There were so many of them. But I want to go back to the beginning of the first half and use this as kind of an entryway to talk more about the freshmen, because we mentioned that Indiana came out, I thought, looked really sluggish early. Ryan, you kind of mentioned that both teams looked a little bit sluggish. And I thought Indiana really got a nice spark from Justin Smith and Al Durham. They scored 13 of Indiana's first 19 points. Justin in particular had a couple of really nice drives where he started with the ball outside the three-point line and drove all the way to the basket, 2 or 3 dribbles, absorbed contact on one, made it. He ended up only playing, I think, 13, 14 minutes. But while he was out there, was really effective offensively. And then Al Durham, hit some really big shots, especially in the second half, and had some early that were really big too. And he finished with 14 points, 5 of 6 from the field. Ryan, what did you see from those two guys tonight? And is this, kind of a case of these two guys, kind of starting to mature, freshmen become sophomores, as is often the cliche? Or is this kind of a one-game aberration and we shouldn't, put too much into it?
I just saw confidence. I mean, that was purely just confidence, and guys who just felt they clearly feel like they belong on this level. I think both of them, hit a little bit of a freshman wall, certainly with Al Durham. And we've seen him, even though he hasn't been scoring the last few games, he hasn't really been scoring. He's certainly played better. And then you saw that tonight, and not just offensively. He was 5 of 6 offensively, 2 of 2 from 3, 2 of 2 from the free throw line, 2 rebounds, 1 turnover. And he finished with 14 points in 24 minutes. But defensively, he was all over the place and doing a great job. And it is really funny when he gets down in a stance on the perimeter and sticks his arms up, and you're just like, okay, that's ridiculous. Like, he's just his arms are so comedically long. It's just it's hilarious. But I just thought he had a really good overall game. Again, like we said with Devonte, when Devonte plays well, it's sort of, he just didn't go out of his way to do anything crazy. He was sort of, hey, if I've got an open shot, I'm going to shoot it. It was back cutting. It was, driving into the lane when he needed to, not when, there's 25 seconds on the clock and you can make the extra pass. He actually needed to get into the lane at the times he did. Finished well. For Justin Smith, 5 of 7 from the field, 3 of 5 from the free throw line, finished with 13 points in 13 minutes, as you alluded to. And what I liked about Justin was his aggressiveness, but he's still having issues finishing in a crowd. And that's something that's got to change. And I think that part of that is strength, and part of that is just the natural process of getting stronger, as you get older and mature. But there were a couple times, and the 2 shots he missed, I mean, I just felt like, they were makeable shots that he could have finished with a little extra strength. But, can't ask for everything to be perfect from a freshman. As you said, best thing that happens about freshmen is they become sophomores. So, I thought both of them played very well, and they played very focused basketball when they were on the floor. And I think that's also a key. This late in the season, it's a grind, especially with how compressed the schedule has been. And they both looked, engaged. They didn't, they weren't the guys who were having issues with turnovers, which is odd, because you think that the freshmen would be the ones to struggle with, the mental aspect, and they weren't. They were some of the more reliable guys, which I think is a positive when you look at their development and growth moving forward.
Yeah, and the stretch that I meant to point out, I lost it in my notes here. It's when it was 14-12, and so Illinois was actually in the lead, and Justin and Al scored 7 straight points. At a point in the game where Indiana had been struggling a little bit on offense, Justin had a nice drive, Al knocked down a 3, and then Al had a nice little sidestep for a layup on a breakaway. That gave Indiana a 19-14 lead and kind of opened up some space that, again, they would kind of nurse for the rest of that first half. Andy, I mean, as you look at those two guys, again, you look for reasons why Indiana can keep getting better as you go down the stretch here. And, the defense has gotten better. Devonte has obviously been a big reason why the team has played better over the last 5 or 6 games, though not necessarily tonight. Maybe there's still a little bit more potential there in Justin and in Al, as we leave the Minnesotas and the Illinois of the world and get ready to play Nebraska and Ohio State. If we get some contributions from those guys, that'll obviously go a long way towards giving Indiana a shot in those games.
Yeah, I thought Al in particular was really one of the more poised players on the court at times. It was I don't remember at what point, it was some point in the second half where, things were a little bit frenetic. They got the ball across half court and he gathered himself for a minute, but didn't just kind of stand there. Eventually, was able to drive and get a, layup going to the basket, but he was doing it under control and really made some smart decisions. I thought Justin was really active. You kind of see, him hit that face-up jump shot in the first half, and it's kind of like, all right, well, just let him spend as much time as he can with Juwan right now, and then just try to figure out what the, that's the, maybe the blueprint for him as you look forward. But, certainly, for a lineup that they've settled on to start that includes, both McRoberts and McSwain, as we've kind of joked about how that has become, the go-to lineup with the starters. I mean, in the back of your mind, you still got to think like that's pretty unexpected, and you're going to need other guys to step up at some point to provide a little bit of a spark offensively. And I think if those guys can play under control, as they did tonight, because Justin Smith had a couple nice drives to the basket, but they weren't wildly out of control. And I don't remember which game it was. Maybe it was Rutgers, that he was just kind of had the right idea, but was just so out of control and was getting himself called for fouls in that regard. And I thought he was much smarter with those kinds of drives today. So good sign of maturity. He's certainly somebody who can put up points in big spots. He's, his contributions, were a huge factor in winning that first Minnesota game and certainly again tonight. So, good sign for both those guys, especially Al, who kind of struggled with the shot a little bit, to knock down a couple threes, really took him confidently within the flow of the offense. So, hopefully he's kind of hit through the freshman wall and maybe he's able to, finish strong as well as he started.
You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, breaking down Indiana's victory over Illinois. Gentlemen, it is time to go inside the numbers, and I want to kick it off again by just reading Juwan Morgan's stat line because it continues to amaze me. 14 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 steals, 5 blocks.
I was surprised he didn't have more than 10 rebounds because he got 10 rebounds with a few minutes left, too.
I know.
He didn't have any more rebounds after that.
I almost felt like he had more blocks than that, too. And that's what I mean. Like, his stat line is incredible, and it felt like he did more.
Yeah, he blocked a couple after the whistle that were pretty impressive. Those ones, and where he swatted in like the third row, but
so I looked with 5 blocks.
Yeah, 5 blocks. And I look forward to Ken Bykoff's tweet telling us the last time a player was able to do something like that statistically, because Ken's always on point with that. I have to imagine that is a unicorn stat line, a very rare stat line in the history of IU basketball, but especially the 3 assists. I mean, you just don't often see a guy who can get 3 assists, 4 steals, and 5 blocks in a game. And it's just a testament to how active he was and how skilled he is at so many different facets of the game. And I will say this. I hyper-focus on Indiana. I don't watch a whole lot of other teams play, and so I can't say definitively that Juwan Morgan should be first-team All-Big Ten because I haven't watched enough of the other teams. But with every passing game, I find it really, really, really hard to believe that there are 5 players in the Big Ten better than him.
The only excuse for leaving him off is the team's record.
That's stupid.
I agree. I completely agree. I 100% agree with you.
That's such bad criteria for picking the 5 best players. Because think about it. Take him off this team. How many wins does Indiana have? Seriously. 2 in conference play? 1?
Not disagreeing with you, Morris.
I know. So anyway,
I'm with you.
Just an aside there, there'll probably be one of those each segment because I thought Juwan was spectacular tonight. But from a stats perspective, Andy, you look at the rebounding numbers, and Illinois comes out of the gate and they get 4 offensive rebounds before the first media timeout, and you're thinking, Indiana really better shore up the rebounding. Well, they did, because Illinois only finished with 8 total for the game. Indiana cleans up 78.4% of Illinois' missed shots, so the Hoosiers do end up winning the rebounding battle. Which I thought was a big part, of starting to slow Illinois down a little bit. And even though Illinois had some stretches where they got really hot, the Hoosiers held them, another opponent, to under a point per possession, 0.97 points per possession for Illinois. And it's just, again, another sign of the culture change for this Indiana program, because there were so many warts on the offensive end, trying to break the pressure and the turnovers, and still, not a great free throw shooting game and all of that. But still, another opponent comes in and Indiana holds them under a point per possession, and that's just what this team does now. And it continues to be really impressive. So that is another number that jumped out to me. What else jumped out to you, Andy?
Assist numbers, it was hard. Field goals were hard to come by in the second half. I mean, IU only took 17 shots in the second half because of all the free throws, 24 free throws and 17 field goals. So good for the free throw rate, I guess. But, IU had 14 assists on 26 makes. So you're over that 50% mark. is one I know that we've looked at. The free throw shooting was better for the game. It was 69%, 20 of 29 for the game. And again, as I mentioned, 18 of 24 in the second half. So I think that's a positive sign. One of the numbers you didn't mention about Juwan, he was 6 of 7 from the line, which is certainly very important for him. So that stood out, held Illinois to just 41% shooting and 21% from three. So, those numbers continue to trend in a positive direction. I mentioned the 2-point shooting for IU earlier. I thought that was another big one. And I don't know what it feels like. It'd be interesting to go back and look at this. But when you kind of combine blocks and steals as some kind of proxy for defensive activity level, I mean, that added up to 15 tonight for IU, 6 blocks, 9 steals. I feel like we've continued to say that with regularity as the season has worn on, that adding those numbers together has been, typically in the mid-teens, it feels like. And so I think that's a positive sign. Again, it speaks well to how the defense played. Certainly the turnover number sticks out as a negative, but other than that, there's not a whole lot to nitpick from a performance standpoint. I think, if IU doesn't turn the ball over, it turns the ball over a few less times. The way that they, were scoring in stretches, IU probably wins by 18, and maybe the game takes less than 2 hours and 20 minutes to play. Who knows?
Hey, you're right. By the way, you mentioned Morgan going 6 or 7 from the line. I mean, he also only had 3 personal fouls, despite being involved on almost every play. And his ability to defend, standing up, guys bigger than him down low, continues to amaze. And he played 37 minutes. So, he did everything but make a 3-pointer tonight. Ryan, you mentioned deflections in the chat. And, it is kind of a ha-ha thing, that we talk about after the previous coaching staff, but there were a lot of those too. I mean, there were 3 straight possessions in the second half where Indiana deflected a ball out of an Illinois player's hands and it went off the Illinois guy and we got it, or 2. And then the third one, they kept it, but it just showed you how active Indiana's hands were. Ryan, what numbers jumped out to you?
Just the shooting percentage, 59.1%, 26 of 44 from the field. As you guys mentioned, you mentioned the points per possession going up a little bit, still being under 1 per possession, but also when you factor in that Illinois shot 30 free throws, that's going to go up. So, if you think about it, if there had been fewer fouls called, maybe it winds up being a little bit lower. I
don't want to think about a world with fewer fouls, Ryan. So I refuse to hypothesize what that might be like.
That's fair. I mean, why would you want a more cleanly played game? I mean, that's silly. I know I'm out of my depth. But again, the last stat I wanted to go with again was rebounding, 34 to 23, out rebounded Illinois heavily with that shorter lineup that Indiana's been using. I know Illinois doesn't have a ton of size, but still guys like Freddie McSwain getting 6 boards, Robert Johnson 6 boards, Juwan Morgan 10. The bench rebounded well. The ability to do that with a smaller, more active, quicker lineup is huge. And so kudos to Indiana for picking that up, particularly on the defensive end.
By the way, for those of you asking in the chat, Ryan actually asked me before the show as well. These are not tattoos that are here on my cheek. I did not get punched. They are Valentine's Day stickers that my daughter placed on my face this morning, and they have stayed on all day. And when your daughter puts stickers on your face on Valentine's Day, you can't take them off.
You look ridiculous.
Well, you know what? Someday she's going to watch this episode and she's going to say, you know what? My dad kept those stickers on. And frankly, I seek her approval more than yours.
I really hope she doesn't watch this show.
Something will have had to gone very wrong in her life. Someday she's back watching an Indiana-Illinois postgame show. Please don't. If you are watching this, just stop right now. Not you who are with us live, but my daughter. Don't do it. All right. Coming up on the Assembly Call, we continue our breakdown of Indiana's victory over Illinois. We need to talk a little bit more about Robert Johnson, and so we will do that next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game and every Thursday night on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. You can also view all of our live broadcasts right on our homepage at assemblycall.com. I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, talking about Indiana's victory over Illinois tonight that pushed the Hoosiers over 500 in conference play as they prepare for the stretch run with games coming up at Iowa, at Nebraska, and against Ohio State. And one guy who is obviously going to have to play well for Indiana to win those games, or 2 out of those 3 games, is Robert Johnson. And Andy, this kind of felt like, in a lot of ways, kind of the quintessential Robert Johnson game for this season, because, when you just think about it, to me, I think about a lot of the mistakes that he made, like right off the bat. He had 6 turnovers, looked really tentative on some of those plays, and those really stick out. But then, you go back and you look at the stats, and he's tied for the team lead in points at 14, had 4 assists to lead the team, had 6 rebounds, so continues to kind of lead the way in terms of guards rebounding, which Archie Miller wants. And then you look at what Trent Frazier did. He was 5 of 14, and Robert played a lot of defense on him. And a couple of the threes that he made, as most of his threes have been this year, were pretty big at the time that he made them, and kind of kept, Illinois at arm's length. So, it's kind of just, like I said, the quintessential Robert Johnson game, because there were a lot of mistakes there that kind of stuck out like sore thumbs, but overall, plenty more good than bad, in a game where Indiana really needed a contribution like this from Robert.
Yeah, I mean, if you cut the turnovers in half, you're talking about him, maybe not in the same way as Juwan Morgan, but if you have, a few less turnovers that might lead to a couple more points and, things like that, that to me was the big spot that sticks out, is there was just times when he just made just terrible passes, for lack of a better term. And you just, need more from, normally you would sit there and say, oh, there's senior guards out there, everything's going to be fine. And then you find yourself watching the game, clutching, digging your fingernails into your leg, hoping that nothing terrible happens. It's like the exact opposite of what you would expect in that scenario.
What a quaint thought.
Yeah.
Senior guards.
Yeah, senior guards, everything's going to be fine. And then it's like, holy crap, everything's just going to go.
Just get the ball across half court and get it to Juwan. You have one job.
Yeah, that's where we are. Exactly. So I think that sums it up well. And so, but you're right. He hit some timely shots. He made all 3 of his 2-point shots, missed a couple free throws down the stretch, which you'd obviously like to see him hit in, if the game was a little bit closer than it was at the time that he missed those. But yeah, I mean, he did, he created opportunities for other players at times, turned the ball over, trying to do the same thing at others, and certainly rebounding. I felt like he got a lot of those late, was really able to get in it and work that into the game, because that's something that obviously we've talked about, all the emphasis on guard rebounding and things like that. So yeah, it was definitely a mixed bag. I think we'd view this game a lot differently for him if it weren't for the turnovers. But I do think defensively, he continues to draw the assignment of the other team's best perimeter player, and has really done a good job of trying to fight through screens and things like that. There was a lull for a while tonight where IU really struggled. Illinois just bunching 2 guys together, and the communication wasn't as good in some of those stretches. But I thought he did a really good job of making them work, trying to push Frazier, to his offhand, and I thought played really well on that end of the floor. Sean Morris pointed that out a couple times, and so as much as I try not to agree with Sean Morris, I thought that was a well-made point by him. Perhaps most stunning of all, Sean Morris was referencing like advanced analytics and talk. Well, I don't know if offensive rebound percentage is advanced analytics, but he was like quoting that, and I was like, I'm not sure what's happening right now. I was waiting for him to weave in a good dad joke somewhere thereafter, but he actually was just stuck with statistical analysis, which was a little bit concerning.
After what we heard Friday night, Sean Morris was a welcome change.
Welcome in Bloomington anytime.
Yeah. And just maybe not that forest green jacket that he was wearing. Like, stay out of Tom Izzo's closet before you come to Bloomington. Just the only request. Let's bring in president of the Freddie McSwain fan club, Ryan Phillips, who finds a way to give Freddie the game ball every game. Ryan, if I had told you that really kind of the dagger basket in this game would have been Al Durham going back door and Freddie McSwain throwing a little bounce pass off the dribble with one hand, what would you have said?
The best part about that was as he threw it, he kind of like turned his head like he was throwing a no-look pass. It was like, nice, Freddie. Attaboy. Put some mustard on that hot dog. I like it.
He tried to cross somebody up in the first half, too. It was amazing.
He did. And you know what? That is a play. First off, that is not a play in the playbook. There is no play where Archie Miller wants Freddie McSwain to start dribbling from outside the 3-point line and drive all the way in. But to Freddie's credit, that was the only bucket he missed all night. I mean, he was 2 for 3, 9.6 boards, and after a bit of a rough start, I thought really kind of settled down and gave Indiana some really good minutes again, just out there doing Freddie McSwain things.
5 of 8 from 3 for the free throw line, which is perfect Freddie territory. I don't think anybody's upset when he goes 5 of 8 from the free throw line. I'm upset when he shoots it at all, but if you're going to go 5 of 8, that's fine. But no, I thought it was a great game for Freddie as always. I think that you know what you're going to get from him, and you're going to get a ton of effort, and his ability to help and recover defensively and to continue to move his feet against bigger players is huge. Where guys try and push him up the lane maybe and try and, get behind him, he'll spin off and get, to the other side, get to the correct side and be active that way. Really a positive game for Freddie again. And he's really, you can't say enough about him. The guy is putting in a ton of work and getting the most out of his physical ability. And you don't get to say that about a whole lot of people. And he certainly is doing that. And I thought it was great tonight that when he came out, the fans gave him a huge ovation. And he deserves it. He certainly deserves it.
You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Brian Phillips talking about Indiana's victory over Illinois. Another guy I'd like to talk about, Andy, is Zach McRoberts. And, he had that stretch there in the middle of conference play from the Maryland game to the Ohio State game where he played at least 31 minutes in every game. Since that stretch, since he played 33 minutes at Ohio State, he's played 18, 25, 26, and 20. And a big part of the reason for that is he's been in foul trouble a lot more recently than he was in the past. Is there, and I'll tell you the other thing about Zach is, and tell me if you're getting this same sense, he seems a little less solid offensively to me. Like I feel like he's maybe forcing a few more passes. Like it feels like he's maybe trying to do a tad too much. And again, we have been calling for him to shoot more and get a little bit more involved offensively. But I feel like, maybe some of that involvement is, him maybe trying to force a pass here or there. And so he's turning the ball over a little bit more. And in fact, he's had 4 turnovers in the last 4 games. And he had 3 turnovers over the previous 13 games. So, Zach, a guy still that you can count on. His defense is obviously still very good. But, the foul trouble is becoming a bit of an issue and turning the ball over just a bit more. And he's a guy that you can't get turnovers from him offensively because he doesn't really give you a ton on offense. So he's got to minimize those. Not huge concerns, but, again, as you kind of look at the margins for what Indiana can do to just keep getting better, I think, being able to keep Zach on the floor for a little bit more to have his defense will be helpful.
Yeah, I think that, the challenge is he seems very reluctant to shoot again after having a couple games where he shot the ball relatively well. If you look at the last 3 games, he's played 71 minutes and taken 1 shot. So I think that's, the other part that becomes difficult where, again, nobody's asking him to go out and take, 6 to 8 shots a game, but he's, I think teams again are starting to see he's looking to pass all the time. The one he turned over in the backcourt, it was Frazier just sitting there, looking at his chops, knowing this guy wants to get rid of the ball and just, kind of baited him into that pass and jumped into the passing lane. So I don't think a huge concern. I think the foul trouble is more of a concern, but for me, again, he's got to try to strike that balance of being enough of a threat offensively to take shots that, he's not out there for such long stretches where the opposition feels like they don't really even need to guard him. But what do you want to sound the KenPom alarm that's been updated and now he's up to 50th in defensive efficiency.
I was just going to do a pop quiz and ask you that.
Oh, well, little did you know that I was already refreshing it. So
this is how we operate here on the Assembly Call. We're refreshing while we're doing the show. But
you guys are. I'm just hanging out.
You're watching skiing or
he's watching ice dancing. I think.
Yeah, some Winter Olympic sport right now. But look, Andy, let's take a moment and reflect on that since Ryan is not interested in talking advanced metrics. It was very conspicuous earlier. Guy. No, it was very conspicuous earlier, Ryan, how you mentioned the rebounding numbers and went with the raw totals, which I thought was so 1998 of you. That was terrific.
Yeah, because I'm a normal human being who looks at such things.
But seriously, Indiana sitting at 50th in defense. This is a team that was in the 200s earlier this season. And again, even though you look at some stretches tonight and giving up 68 points to Illinois wasn't as impressive as what they did against Rutgers and Minnesota, it was still another game where they improved their overall defensive efficiency and just another step in the right direction. And here's the bigger point here. And Ryan, I do want to get your thoughts on this. Is I thought this was a game where Indiana got a lot of its energy from defense. I mean, obviously they were struggling offensively to get any continuity, but there were so many plays. And, again, I mentioned these earlier, some of these other plays in my notes from Juwan Morgan, but, he had that steal and dunk in the first half that I thought, or maybe that was early in the second half, but I thought that was a really big play. That put Indiana up 23-14. It was part of that big 14-0 run that Indiana used in the first half to kind of blow the game open. All the block shots that he had, some of, the defensive rebounds that he had. This team, this program's identity now is defense. Like, I think that is pretty safe to say. And it was so evident in a game like tonight where you come out and you don't have a ton of energy. It's not like you make some threes early to get it. But it's like in this game, Indiana kind of grinded themselves into energy on the defensive end, and then it helped, they got some transition buckets out of it on offense. And it just, a testament to the turnaround that has been done within this season, which continues to be really impressive.
Yeah, I think you have to be more perfect and fine with your movements to get momentum off of offense. I think it's you got to hit a lot of shots. You got to do this, you got to do that, maybe have big dunks. Whereas defensively, just a stop can get you momentum. I mean, just simply stopping the other team. You get a shot clock violation, you get a steal, whatever. Those are big momentum swings. But just playing solid defense, getting a stop and getting a good rebound can build momentum. And we've mentioned this before, is if you play great defense, it makes the game so much easier in every other aspect, because you can have an off night offensively. And Indiana had an off night early and wound up, improving as it went. But it just makes everything else so much easier when you can rely on yourself to get stops, get rebounds, not give up second chance points. And, part of that too is not turning the ball over, which Indiana did tonight a lot, but if you don't turn it over, you don't give the other team easy buckets. You make them work for baskets. And if you play good defense, you make the other team work for baskets, expend their energy offensively. And then when they're playing defense, they're not going to be as engaged or as tough. I mean, guys get discouraged when they miss shots, when they're, do everything they can and can't score. It changes the way the game flows. And so we said that a lot. It's a lot easier to play from the defensive end out as opposed to the other way around. And the degree of difficulty drops when you play solid defense, and you're seeing that from Indiana. They're winning games with defense. I mean, they scored 78 points tonight, great, but that game was won on the defensive end, and it was won on the glass by rebounding and not letting Illinois get second chance points. So really, I thought an excellent performance, and you're right. I mean, they are building momentum through defense, and it's obvious to see when you watch the team play.
Yeah, and Indiana's second in the conference in defensive efficiency, giving up 0.983 points per game in conference play. And Indiana 14th in that stat last year. And Andy, as we mentioned on Assembly Call Radio, or one of our recent shows, if you go to barttorvik.com, another advanced analytics site where you can actually look at the stats based on different time windows, over the last 10, 11 games, Indiana third in the country in defensive efficiency behind Virginia and Cincinnati. So, obviously you're never going to get rid of the Fort Wayne game and the Indiana State game and the Howard game and some of the really, really bad performances that are baked into the stats right now. But, the team that Indiana is right now is essentially one of the best defensive teams in the country. And, that is given where this program has been and where they were just a couple of months ago. It's obviously a testament to the coaching staff, because they've done a great job installing their system, teaching it to the guys. But it is definitely a big testament to the guys for buying in and essentially doing a complete 180 from what their identity was, and to be able to do that, and now to have so much confidence doing it and to be winning games because of it. We'll see what it means for the rest of this season and if it leads to any type of success in the Big Ten tournament or anything like that. But such a great sign just for the future direction of the program.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing to sit back and look at the strides that they made. And at one point in the broadcast, somebody joked this was because the crowd wasn't big enough, but you could hear the communication on the defensive end of the floor in the first half, where they're kind of I think it might have actually was I think it was the first half, that you can hear guys kind of talking through screens and fight through it and fight over it and that kind of thing. And just, the understanding of the rotations and things like that is just night and day. If you would, I do not recommend, nor will I be going back to watching like any of those, terrible performances earlier in the season. But I think if anyone was able to stomach that experience, you would see some pretty dramatic differences in the way this team is just rotating and covering, covering things in ball screens and things like that, where they were just getting murdered on early in the season. And so I think, if they're, who knows what ends up happening this season and whether the NIT happens or not, and what this team really does in any kind of tournament setting. But I think you can definitely look back and feel good about the progress they've shown defensively. And for the most part, outside of some of these Illinois games, the focus on turning the ball over has proven effective as well. So if you really want to look at everybody, you wanted to focus on those couple things coming into the season, I think it'd be hard not to be pleased with the progress in those areas in year one.
All right, coming up in our final segment of this edition of the Assembly Call, we hand out our game balls, we look ahead to Indiana's next opponent, and we deliver our final thoughts on Indiana's victory over Illinois in last call. That is next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, wrapping up our breakdown of Indiana's 78-68 victory over Illinois. And it is that time of the show where we hand out our game balls. And while usually I am the very magnanimous host and I give the honors to Andy or Ryan first, I am taking the honors tonight because I am giving my game ball to Juwan Morgan. As I've mentioned many times already on the show, I thought he was magnificent. And there's another stretch that I want to point out. And for this stretch, I'm going to take you back to the first half. And it was 28-20, about 3 minutes left in the first half. And if you remember from the first Illinois game, Indiana had kind of controlled that first half and then really played poorly down the stretch in the first half, let Illinois back in it. And that was kind of a harbinger for bad things to come in the second half. And for the first few minutes out of the under 4 minute timeout, it's almost like Juwan just wasn't going to let Indiana kind of fall back into that trap, into that kind of bad play. And he had a huge offensive rebound. You'll recall that three-pointer that Colin Hartman took from the left wing. And Juwan Morgan just kind of appears out of nowhere and grabs this one-handed offensive rebound. He ended up getting the ball out to Robert Johnson. It was passed around the arc to Josh Newkirk, who ended up driving and scoring. And then the next possession down, he gets back in transition, makes an incredible block without fouling. That leads to a quick bucket up the other way for a layup. So it was two huge plays by Juwan. He didn't score the points, but he created the opportunities for the points because of the offensive rebound, because of the block. That put Indiana up 12 and gave them a little bit of a cushion because they made a couple of bad plays late. But it was just another stretch where, Juwan didn't score, but he was just out there combining hustle and intelligence in a way that very, very few Indiana big men ever have. I mean, he just plays so well and plays so smart. And I just thought, I know, again, he's had games where he scored more points, but I think there have been very few games where he has been more impactful in terms of winning than he was tonight. So my game ball goes to Juwan Morgan. Ryan, would you like to make up tonight's reason why Freddie McSwain gets your game ball?
No, because I'm going with Al Durham. I thought once Devonte Green went down, I thought that Al Durham added a lot to the team on both ends of the floor. I mean, he was before that, but I thought that he came up with some big plays and plays in situations where Illinois was maybe coming back into the game. And he just stuck his foot down and he played really well. And you saw a lot of confidence from him. And I really like the way that he's playing. I mean, we knew he was a confident kid when he came in. He sort of hit a wall and he sort of disappeared from, he was playing, but he disappeared from the court for long stretches of time. And I thought tonight was definitely, a reintroduction to Al Durham. I thought he played fantastic. And again, 5 of 6 from the field, 2 of 2 from 3, 2 of 2 from the free throw line, grabbed 2 rebounds, played 24 minutes of great defense and had 14 points total. So I got to give it to Al. I thought he played really well. And I thought that he stepped up and when the team really needed him.
Andy, his career is coming to a close, only a few games left. Are you going to take this opportunity to give Robert Johnson a game ball?
I am not. I probably would have gone with either of the two that you mentioned, but I think another senior guard deserves a little bit of recognition tonight. So I'm going to give mine to Josh Newkirk. Hit some really big shots, hit a big 3 in that driving layup in the second half. Just made some clutch shots. And quite honestly, after seeing him, I think the first shot he took was a 3-pointer that missed the rim and almost went through the backboard. And he only missed 1 shot the rest of the way from there and ended up with 11 points and 3 assists. Did have the 3 turnovers, but I thought played big minutes in the second half. As Ryan said, once Devonte went out, I thought Josh played played well, certainly made mistakes. But for a guy who came into the game really looking like he was searching for something and really struggling, thinking through every single thing that he was doing, he finally seemed like he just kind of let everything go in the second half and just kind of played. And he's not going to be a superstar, but I think one of the things that we like about thinking about college sports and other guys is, the chance to see people, persevere through some struggles and play well. And I thought tonight was a good opportunity for him to do that. So definitely would recognize him. Again, I think probably the two guys that you mentioned would have been my first couple choices, but I thought Josh had some really, really key minutes and was just happy for him to play well after struggling so much and kind of, I think, trying to, come to grips with, one, the fact that his college career is coming close to an end, and two, he'd lost his starting job. And so hopefully this gives him some confidence down the stretch. Just not to say that he's going to get the starting job back, but I think to be able to have guys like him and Al and Justin to be able to come off the bench and provide a lift like they did tonight bodes well for this team down the stretch.
And by the way, I know we've mentioned it on the show before, and I've put it in a couple of the emails that we send out, which if you're not getting, go to assemblycall.com/join so you get them. But the three of us will be at Robert Johnson's senior night, along with all the other seniors for that game there against Ohio State. So if you're going to be at the game, we'd love to meet you. Definitely, hit us up, send me an email, jared@assemblycall.com, send us a tweet. We're kind of finalizing the plans for where we'll be before the game and after the game, but we'd love to get a chance to see you if you will be there in town or at the game. So I wanted to mention that. Also, the only update that I've seen on Devonte so far, this comes from Zach Osterman on Twitter, said that Archie suggested that Devonte would be sore, but didn't seem terribly worried beyond that. So that, is obviously good news. Devonte did not play well tonight, but on balance over the last 5 or 6 games, he has been very good, and he's been a big reason why the team has been playing better. So any injury to him would obviously make Indiana really thin in the backcourt and remove their best playmaker. So hopefully Devonte doesn't have any lingering issues from this, and maybe learns a few lessons, and maybe if he got a little overconfident, gets a little of that humility back that Archie talked about that he had, and is ready to go down the stretch, being a little bit more of that singles and doubles hitter instead of going for the home run so often. And Andy, speaking of Indiana's next game, the Hoosiers play Iowa. That is a Saturday afternoon special. We know how Ryan loves the early afternoon games.
My favorite.
Ryan also complained about the late start time tonight, so I'm curious what
there's a very small window
is in which game should be played.
I think between 5 o'clock and like 7, you're good. But 8:30 is late. Come on, guys.
Especially for Illinois. Like no Illinois game should go this late, given how much they foul. So always put them in the early slot. But Andy, Indiana heads up to Iowa. It seems like forever ago that Indiana beat Iowa 77-64 at home. What is awaiting the Hoosiers here up in Iowa City?
Well, Iowa has they played 3 of their last. They lost at Michigan tonight, so they've lost their last 4 games, 3 of which were on the road, and against some of the better teams in the Big Ten. Just 3-12 in the conference right now. If you look at them from a statistical standpoint, on the season they're ranked 28th in offensive efficiency overall, but if you just look at conference only, they're 7th, so right in the middle of the pack. Offensive rebounding percentage is 1st in Big Ten play, so we talked about IU's rebounding tonight. That will certainly be a focus area for them, but they have turned the ball over quite a bit, have shot the 3 well. I think they're a team that's going to be known more for offense, certainly based on their profile in these last couple of years. And that's good because defensively they are dead last in the Big Ten in adjusted defense efficiency.
They're 4 points worse than we were last year.
Well, I was just going to wonder that because I looked at this number and I'm like, that is
good
insane.
Lord.
And I wasn't sure how bad IU was last year. So yeah, take IU's defense from last year and make something a little bit worse. And that's what Iowa looks like this year. So, they've struggled to defend 2s and 3s pretty equally. So that's good to see. So I think, again, it will be a test for IU's defense if they can continue to play the way they have been and hold Iowa down offensively. I think much like tonight, you can, if you take care of the basketball, you're going to be able to find opportunities to score. But again, road environment, IU hasn't played great on the road, certainly this season, but a winnable road game and certainly the more winnable of the 2 that are coming up in these next couple for IU.
Yep. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember that because you are an Assembly Call listener, you get 15% off of your entire order at HoosierProud.com. So if you want officially licensed IU gear, one of our Assembly Call logo t-shirts, or one of Hoosier Proud's unique Indiana-inspired designs, visit HoosierProud.com and use the promo code Assembly at checkout. That's HoosierProud.com, promo code Assembly for 15% off of your entire order. I'm Jared Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and it is time for Last Call, our final thoughts on tonight's Indiana game. And Ryan, we will go to you first. Last call.
Another good win for Indiana to get this one out of the way. That's 3 in a row following a 4-game losing streak where, for the most part, they played pretty well. 3 out of those 4 games, I thought they played pretty well. They shouldn't have lost to Illinois at the beginning of that stretch, but at the same time, played very well against Purdue, played very well against Michigan State. So you're really starting to see a trend with this team where they play defense and they make it difficult on their opponents. And if they can keep that up, then they've got a real chance in these last 3 games. At Iowa, at Nebraska, not going to be easy, but they can win both of those games, make it 5 in a row heading into senior night. I mean, if they can win those 2 games, the record looks a lot better at 17-12, and you clinch finishing above 500 in the Big Ten, which a couple weeks ago I think people didn't think was possible. So again, really nice finish to this season is entirely possible, especially after that really murderous stretch they just went through, to get these 3 wins in a row and be heading to Iowa with a chance to really put an exclamation point on the season would be great, and maybe get into some postseason play. So real positive, obviously, well played, and I think that Archie and the team deserve a lot of credit.
All right, now we'll get Andy's thoughts. And by the way, hopefully you guys know this, but Andy's brackets this year, not at assemblycall.com. They've been moved over to insidethehall.com. We all kind of figured they would get more eyeballs and more exposure over there. And obviously we love our relationship that we have with Alex Bozich, so it just seemed like a better fit. So I assume those brackets will start coming out even more regularly now, Andy. But if you're looking for those, obviously follow Andy on Twitter at Andy Bottoms and look for those at insidethehall.com. But your final thoughts on this Indiana victory?
Well, again, I've been kind of viewing the Big Ten season in a lot of ways in these 3-game segments, and IU went 3-0 in that last one. 3 winnable games that you'd certainly hope or expect that they would win, but certainly were times earlier in the season that even games you thought that this team would be able to come out on the better end of, they weren't able to. So I think that's a positive sign. I think everything just points to this kind of slow and steady growth that they've had. Particularly on the defensive end, that continues to be an area where they have performed really well. And I thought, for me tonight, the biggest thing was in a game where they didn't take great care of the basketball, and they started both halves kind of sloppy. It was good to see a number of different guys step up and really kind of pull them out of the malaise that they were in those times, to have 6 guys score at least 9 points, and to get the production and the lift they got off the bench, I thought was fantastic. And hopefully the free throw shooting, as much as we've harped on it, this gives them some confidence. Archie has talked so much about it being a confidence thing and a mental thing. So hopefully seeing 75% of the free throws go down in the second half is a good boost for this team, because I think certainly if they're going to keep this winning streak up, and if they're going to, if they're going to be able to do that, as Ryan said, and finish the season really strong, the games that are left project to be much closer than these last few have been. And so if they're able to continue that momentum from a free throw perspective, I think that will certainly be important. And so hopefully they gain some confidence there. And certainly guys like Al and Justin and Josh coming off the bench should feel good about the way they played. Were a huge factor. I think at least a couple of them were the guys that Archie sent to the post-game press conference, and rightfully so. Maybe all 3, to be honest with you. So I think a good sign for them, and hopefully, a springboard that they can have going into these 2 road games. I'll be particularly rooting for IU to beat Nebraska so that people can stop asking me why I don't have Nebraska in my projected bracket. The answer is because you have beaten one team that would be in the tournament if it started today.
I like it. Salty Andy, when there's like a few teams, a few fan bases that continue to ask about their particular team, is always entertaining, Andy. So my thoughts, look, we are now, with this win over Illinois, we have now entered charted territory for Indiana. This is the 3rd straight win, and this is the 3rd time all season that Indiana has won 3 games in a row. They did it earlier this season, then lost to Duke. That was in November. They did it in January and lost to Michigan State. So obviously, you play a couple, two of the better teams in the country. That's a pretty good way to have a winning streak snapped. But now our hope is that Indiana can enter uncharted territory and get a fourth win in a row, certainly in, as Andy mentioned, a winnable road game at Iowa. And so we're all going to be watching that game with great anticipation to see how Indiana comes out, how that defense stacks up against Iowa's offense. One conversation that I'm starting to see a lot of, and it's totally natural, is, you start playing the what if game and you start looking at Indiana's record. Well, man, if we had that Indiana State game back, and look, I tweeted this last week, so I totally get it. It'd be great to have those games back because we all feel like we'd play much better in them. But the Indiana State game, the Fort Wayne game, the Wisconsin game, the Illinois game, like you think about these games that were real opportunities for wins. And I guess I would say about that, like thinking realistically, yeah, the Illinois game is probably the one where you look at and it's like, you know what? I mean, yeah, I'm sure we learned some lessons from it. Hopefully you learn lessons from every loss, but really that game just came down to really bad free throw shooting. So, I mean, that's really one that you want to have back because it's not like anything massive needed to change. I'm not sure how worthwhile it is to wonder about the Indiana State, the Fort Wayne, and the Wisconsin losses, because frankly, I'm not sure that the growth that we've seen Indiana make actually happens without those losses. And there's no way to know that, obviously, but a part of me really feels like the embarrassment of the Indiana State loss and the Fort Wayne loss helped these guys who were so offensively driven kind of flip the switch to say, you know what, we've got to change what we're doing and we have to play better defense. And the defense really started to, improve. Actually, we saw some shades of it before the Fort Wayne game, but that was obviously a step back. But then the improvement continued after that. And then the Wisconsin game, a huge missed opportunity. Maybe Indiana, one of Indiana's worst halves of the season, that second half. And Archie was ticked off, but Indiana has really played well since then, especially from a rebounding perspective. And so maybe, for this team that was not good last year and then lost three terrific individual players off that team, and then you're trying to change a culture. I think when you're doing that, there are going to be kind of some key moments along the way that kind of help push you back push you into the new direction. And so I just wonder, I know it's easy to look back and say, yeah, if you take this team and put them in those games, they're going to play better. And that is true. But I just wonder if this team would be where it was without those losses. And sometimes a season is a journey where those losses can really mean something. They can help push you toward what you are at the end of the season. The hope is that they don't, those losses don't sink your chances for the NCAA tournament, as those losses probably did for Indiana this year. But I just think it's important to remember when you're playing the what if game, don't totally discount those losses as being completely without worth. Because while they are dragging down Indiana's record on the season, I do think that they were important, for this team to make the change that they needed to make, and now they are. And so let's enjoy this new defense that we're playing, enjoy this team that really seems to be playing well together, to have a lot of confidence and to be playing really hard. And they've become a fun team to watch and a team where I think we're all anticipating every next game. And certainly, where they were a couple months ago, that's a big jump and an exciting jump. And hopefully it will continue against Iowa and then down for those final two games against Nebraska and Ohio State. That'll do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember that our live broadcasts immediately following every IU game are always available on our homepage at assemblycall.com and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. You can always catch up on demand anytime with our podcast. Just search for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com/join to join our free email newsletter. Again, that's assemblycall.com/join. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again tomorrow night for Assembly Call Radio. That's Thursday night. And then Saturday after the IU Iowa game. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.